Tonight, as the House prepares to vote for another economic relief package,
American people are in pain, and we have to address it. And we have to address it in a big way.
the number of Americans out of work increases by the millions. The latest on the state of the crippled economy. Plus, a leading vaccine government official says he was fired because he disagreed with the Trump administration on coronavirus treatments.
2020 could be the darkest winter in modern history.
And now, lawmakers want to know more. And how the pandemic is bringing the world together to fight the growing threat of starvation. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
A dire warning from a Washington whistleblower. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup. The virus is here, it's everywhere, and it could get worse this winter.
That warning coming today from the government's former top doc on biomedical research. Dr. Richard Bright filed a whistleblower complaint after getting fired earlier this year.
For more on today's hearing, we turn now to CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail, Dr. Bright didn't mince words about what he thinks could be in store.
That's right, John. While we're seeing many states ease their lockdown restrictions, Dr. Bright cautioned that the window of opportunity to successfully fight the coronavirus is closing, and he issued this dire warning.
Without better planning, 2020 could be the darkest winter in modern history.
Bright called for a national testing strategy and testified that leadership ignored his early warnings about the crisis.
I began pushing urgently in January, along with some industry colleagues as well, and those urges, those alarms were not responded to with action.
1 month ago, Bright was removed as director of BARDA, the federal agency working to find a vaccine. He claims his removal came after complaining no action was taken to stock up on treatments like remdesivir, while he raised alarms on promoting untested drugs.
My concerns around the safety of hydroxychloroquine in people infected with the COVID-19 virus were reflective of the scientific review that we received from an interagency group of clinicians and regulatory experts and scientists.
Republican Representative Morgan Griffith argued that while the drug may be untested, with no known cure available for people facing death, the side effects pale in comparison.
If you're worried about not having a heartbeat at all, that's really not, you're not worried about irregular if you don't have one at all. Am I not correct?
We need to do it carefully, sir.
President Trump responded to Bright's testimony.
We've had tremendous response to the hydroxy. To me, he's nothing more than a really disgruntled, unhappy person.
HHS Secretary Alex Azar says Bright's accusations do not hold water.
Everything he's complaining about was achieved. Everything he talked about was done. Oh, and by the way, whose job was it to actually lead the development of vaccines? Dr. Bright. So while we're launching Operation Warp Speed, he's not showing up for work to be part of that.
Now, Bright argues that it's aggressive and unlikely a vaccine will be available in the next 12 to 18 months, while President Trump said today that he hopes to see one by the end of this year. Back to you, John and Jenna.
All right, thank you, Abby. Well, congressional leaders are back in the nation's capital, preparing to vote tomorrow on the $3 trillion aid package aimed at providing economic relief. But today, lawmakers weighed moving forward with remote voting in the future. A Democratic proposal would allow for proxy voting, where an absent legislator designates a colleague to cast floor votes on their behalf.
This should not be about partisanships. This should be about, do we want this institution to have the capacity to meet at times of crisis?
House Republicans say allowing proxy voting would undo 200 years of precedent. Lawmakers will decide on the issue tomorrow.
Meanwhile, new numbers out today show nearly 3 million more Americans applied for unemployment benefits in just the last week.
Yeah, but the Trump administration says there's still reason to be optimistic about the economy. Eric Phillips is with us now. Eric, this week we've seen warnings of long-term recession. Why this optimism?
Well, Jenna and John, roughly 36 million Americans have applied for help since the pandemic wrecked businesses across the nation about 2 months ago. But now some are saying that it is absolutely vital for us to reopen America, and therein lies the possible silver lining. Although this week's applications are high, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett says that number isn't surprising and in some sense encouraging.
I think the fact that we came in under 3 million suggests that the turning on of the economy is beginning, and it's beginning to show up in the data. And so what we expect now is that claims will continue to decline as the economy turns back.
Hassett says the really important stat will be the number of claims made in states actively working to reopen versus those that aren't.
My fear is that the places that stay closed could have sort of skyrocketing claims, and that the aggregate number could continue to increase like we're seeing right now.
President Trump telling Fox News that as Americans get back to work, he predicts a major economic comeback.
I call it a transition to greatness. You're going to have the third quarter. People are starting to get into that right now, but it's going to be a transition. That's a transition quarter. We're going to do well in the fourth quarter.
Protests calling for reopening continue to grow in Michigan, home of some of the country's most restrictive orders.
If people are going to come down and demonstrate, do it in a responsible way, is what we ask.
Wednesday, the Wisconsin State Supreme Court struck down the governor's stay-at-home order, ruling he overstepped his bounds. It paved the way for businesses to reopen, including bars and restaurants.
It was a surprise. It came very, very quick. They're all excited and nervous at the same time because this was something we thought was going to drag out to the point where our businesses were going to close.
Still, some experts concerned about the long term warn a huge tab will be waiting for the nation to pay.
The more money that the Federal Reserve has to borrow, in the end, that can only be paid back through taxation, and that obviously will place a burden on the U.S. economy for maybe more than one generation.
And White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett also says grocery prices, which are soaring right now, will level off as the economy improves. And he says schools are also a very big deal where the economy is concerned, because closed schools tend to promote a higher level of worker absenteeism, and that will impact productivity. John and Jenna, back to you.
All right, thank you, Eric. Well, North Carolina Senator Richard Burr is stepping down as chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. The temporary move comes one day after the FBI seized his personal phone as part of an investigation into possible insider trading. The Republican lawmaker faces a criminal probe over stock sales in the very early days of the pandemic. Senator Burr denies any wrongdoing and has requested an ethics review of the sales.
And joining us now is David Brody, CBN's chief political analyst. David, Burr's temporary removal as chairman was announced by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell this morning. How bad is this? What's your take?
Well, it could get very bad very quickly for Richard Burr. Look, anytime the FBI says, hey, I'd like to see what's on your cell phone, that's not a good day. Now, look, Barr signed off on this, so that's a concern if you're a Republican, you're conservative, and you're thinking, Barr, is a big pro-Trump guy, and he's letting Burr, or he wants to see Burr's cell phone. Having said that, we also know we have to take all this with a grain of salt. I mean, Donald Trump has kind of put a black eye to a degree on the FBI. A lot of folks will say the FBI did it to themselves, but Donald Trump has been harping on this time and time again that you can't trust the FBI. So, we're not quite sure where we're at specifically on Burr. All I know is that there's a lot more to come out. If they want to see his cell phone, that means they want to see a timeline specifically as to when those stocks were sold, not just when they were sold, but the communication behind it.
The only one. There were other lawmakers who sold stocks as well. Do you think the FBI is investigating some of them?
Well, we know they questioned Dianne Feinstein. We know that for sure. And sure, I mean, they're on the case of all of this. So the question is how big, how broad, and how bipartisan this will be. It sounds, Jenna and John, like it looks like a pretty serious investigation that's not going away anytime soon.
David, President Trump is pushing for a Senate hearing after the release of names of Obama officials potentially involved in the unmasking of Michael Flynn. So far, it doesn't look like Senator Lindsey Graham is keen to the idea.
Right. Well, President Obama, or excuse me, let me start again. President Trump wants President Obama to be the one to testify. He says, Lindsey Graham, hey, call President Obama to the stand in the Senate here. Yeah, good luck with that. That's not happening. But look, I'd like to give you more information about this, but I've been watching the mainstream media coverage, so I don't know much about it because they're not really covering it. I mean, seriously, it's getting a bit ridiculous. Folks, let's understand. Can we step back? Can I step back here a little bit? I mean, look, Joe Biden had an unmasking request on Flynn 7 or 8 days before he left the White House. What in the world is the Vice President of the United States asking for that at that time? Normally, unmasking requests, which are not all too, I mean, they're common, that's fine, but they're normally done by the National Security Agency and intelligence officials. Why is the Vice President of the United States at the time, Joe Biden, asking for Flynn, he didn't know it was Flynn, but that person to be unmasked? A lot of questions are there. And by the way, Joe Biden said he didn't know anything about anything to do with Flynn, neither did Obama. Now we're finding out that's just not true.
Yeah. David, Dr. Bright, he testified on Capitol Hill today, alleging he was removed for refusing to fast-track access to drugs President Trump promoted. He also said the administration ignored his dire predictions. How damaging could this be for President Trump?
Yeah, I think it could be very damaging, actually. And it's not just Bright, right? It's Bright, it's Fauci, it's the scientists that are all kind of coming out and saying, slow down, let's not go back to school. We don't have a vaccine. We could have a resurgence of this in the fall. This could be a nightmare. And so you have science on one side, and you've got on the other side Donald Trump and his economic activity that he's got to get that fourth quarter number up, if you will, to make sure that there's a resurgence economically before the November election.
All right, David Brody, we have to leave it there. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Coming up, innovative ways to track COVID-19 with technology and where those ideas are coming from.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
This is CBN News Watch.
Thanks for joining us.
Watch breaking news, exclusive stories and programs, credible news reporting.
We show you what's happening in the world and how you can pray about it.
This is CBN News Watch, because truth matters. Weekdays at 5 on the CBN News Channel.
Yes, right on time.
From Superbook.
Pepper's Pizza Palace is donating pizza for everyone today. Wait. I have big plans today.
Trust in God even when times are tough. He has a plan for your life.
Hey, we're gonna be late for the grand opening. My parents want me to help with this outreach thing, feeding the community. What am I supposed to do here? Superbook!
Join the Superbook Club and get Superbook The Birth of Moses, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25.
Pharaoh ordered all newborn Hebrew boys thrown into the Nile River, and I have a 3-month-old brother.
The Birth of Moses. Yours for a gift of only $25.
What will you do the next time the soldiers come? I do not know, but I trust God has a plan for all of us.
Superbook Club members, free streaming for seasons 1, 2, and 3 is now available.
Welcome back. A grim outlook for the world economy tonight. A new United Nations forecast predicts a 3.2% global and economic decline is coming. That's the sharpest contraction since the Great Depression in the 1930s. The UN points to shutdowns around the world for the losses, noting 90% of countries have seen some sort of lockdown in recent months. The UN says an economic turnaround will depend on how well the world can protect against a second wave outbreak.
And even as the world searches for a way to recover, millions of people may soon face the threat of starvation.
The UN is warning of multiple famines if countries don't act now. So what can be done? George Thomas brings us the story.
A new study by the United Nations shows an economic fallout that could push 500 million more people into potential famine conditions.
Before COVID hit the scene just a few months ago, I'd already been warning leaders around the world, and especially in Europe, that Africa was in a lot of trouble and that we could have 2020 be the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II before COVID.
David Beasley runs the United Nations World Food Program. His agency says 55 countries at risk right now of severe famine. Sub-Saharan Africa potentially being the hardest hit. The program predicted that if current projections remain, the region will be home to half the world's poor. What countries are most at risk right now?
In Africa, for example, South Sudan will be, Burkina Faso, Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, DRC, just to name a few right off the top.
In war-torn Somalia, WFP has deployed plane loads of protective equipment and medical supplies for distribution throughout the country and surrounding region. Food rations are also being delivered on three-wheelers to residents of the capital city, Mogadishu.
The food that we used to go to get from the shops is now being delivered to our homes. I'm so happy for this. It has changed many things in my life.
Further east, in Nigeria, where 90% of the revenues come from oil, the country's poor, struggling to get food on the table.
People must eat. I strongly believe that hungry is much more dangerous than even the coronavirus. So we must do our best to ensure that people get food to eat.
CBN's Nigeria office preparing to respond, distributing face masks, setting up hand-washing stations, and working with the U.S. Embassy there to create a small chlorine manufacturing plant. Several Nigerian churches are also involved in food distributions.
We've been in total lockdown for about 5 weeks, even though the lockdown has been relaxed somewhat, but then a lot of people's businesses have gone down, and so that is creating a lot of problems, and churches are stepping in to bridge the gap.
Political instability and wars in places like Afghanistan, Syria, Haiti, and Venezuela are also pushing people who were already hanging by a thread over the edge. In battle-scarred Yemen, for example, health workers sounding the alarm as vulnerable children face increased need.
We estimate that an additional 4 million children are going to slide into poverty as a result of COVID-19.
Beasley says lockdowns and sliding economies are making things even harder for the most vulnerable. He warns more people could lose their lives from the economic fallout than from the virus itself.
So if we don't have food, the monies we need, supply chain access, we literally could have famine in dozens of countries around the world. This is not a Chicken Little the sky is falling. This is the reality that we're facing as we speak.
With hundreds of millions across the world already relying heavily on food aid, Beasley says it's critical that countries act now. His group, along with Samaritan's Purse, World Vision, Operation Blessing, and other Christian aid agencies, are deploying vital resources to prevent a potential humanitarian catastrophe.
If you look at the statistics, you find that the number of people infected with the coronavirus is increasing by the day here. So it's very critical to make sure that that can help mitigate the spread of the virus.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Meanwhile, Israel has lifted more restrictions and is trying to get back to life, normal life, as much as possible.
Still, some suggested outbreak prevention measures would be unprecedented. Chris Mitchell has the details from Jerusalem.
In a recent speech, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel is developing technology to fight COVID-19.
Technology that we haven't activated until today, technologies that are accepted according to the law, we will activate them. That means maybe new methods that we are currently working on. I also spoke to our technology heads that they would look for all kinds of means that the state of Israel is really good at.
One of those technologies would include sensors.
There would be one on everyone, every person, every child. First of all, regarding children, there would be a sensor like a car. You get too close, it makes a noise like a buzzer. I don't know if this is possible. We're checking this. We're trying this. But we can, through different means, guard against the transmission of corona.
The technology could be compared to what's used in Mobileye for cars that warns about the danger of getting too close to other vehicles or pedestrians. But the Prime Minister quickly faced criticism. A cyber resilience expert told a major Israeli publication, while she understood the idea in theory, it wouldn't work for humans. It would not pass any practical or legal test. Another concern, who would use the information from the sensors? During the lockdown, the government also approved digital tracking of phones of those who contracted the coronavirus. Later, Israel's High Court said the country needed to pass legislation to regulate such tracking. The controversy came as Israel continues to lift its restrictions. Malls, gyms, and markets are allowed to reopen with temperature checks and social distancing protocols. So far, Israel has had more than 16,000 cases of COVID-19, with around 250 deaths, while the rate of new COVID-19 infections has decreased. But even as things gradually improve here in Israel, it appears that one solution for dealing with the crisis won't be a new system of digital sensors for people. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
Nigerian Christians
in Iran are routinely arrested.
Catholic Christians continue to suffer.
In times of trial and affliction, you need to know the truth.
One of the fastest growing Christian populations in the world.
Join Wendy Griffith and George Thomas for Christian World News.
Young people are the ones who are open to the gospel.
Powerful stories of suffering and hope that affect all Christians. Watch Christian World News, Saturday at 5 p.m. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
Welcome back. The pandemic has not curbed the battle over abortion.
While it's posed new challenges to pro-life advocates, it's also provided opportunities to protect the unborn. Here's Paul Strand.
The Heritage Foundation brought pro-life activists from very different worlds together to see how the pandemic is either helping or hurting their cause.
Brian Fisher's Human Coalition tries to change the minds of women planning to get abortions. They administered to almost 16,000 women in the 6 weeks before the COVID lockdown forced the organization to close its 7 pregnancy centers and just go to phones and internet.
In the 6 weeks afterwards, that call volume jumped to almost 24,000, a 48% increase in calls from women who were in some sort of crisis.
Yesterday, you tweeted that 12 babies were rescued from abortion, bringing that to a total of 16,414 babies rescued to date.
On the other hand, everything happening over the internet these days is giving abortion activists a chance to push abortion pills being mailed straight to women, bypassing doctors.
And Planned Parenthood's acting CEO, Alexis McGill-Johnson, calls this the silver lining of the pandemic. If your position is abortion everywhere without delay, you've got to solve the problem of making that possible when most doctors won't participate. And so what they're seeking is you and a stranger who you're talking to through your iPhone. Chemical abortion is completely unsafe at home. There's no possible way to make this safe.
On the legal front, some pro-life counselors outside abortion clinics have been arrested for breaking social distancing restrictions.
Well within the provision.
It's a state statute.
It's well within the statute. We're doing everything.
But Alliance Defending Freedom lawyer Ken Conley said as some were hauled off to jail in Charlotte, their outreach with an ultrasound unit still saved lives.
One woman was seen in the mobile care unit, had an ultrasound and decided to keep the baby, and another woman as well. I don't think she was in the mobile care unit, but she decided to keep the baby as well as a result of the efforts of the people out there that day.
So even as the pandemic goes on, so do pro-life efforts to save the unborn. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul. Still ahead, how one teen's stepping up to bring some outside life to patients stuck inside the hospital. This is CBN's Faith Nation.
Christians around the world are standing with the Israelis. But why? In CBN's free magazine, Friends of Israel, you'll discover why Christians are supporting the Jewish state, how Israel is fulfilling prophecy as a light to the nations, and ways you can pray for the people of Israel. Israel needs the support of friends like you. Call now or go to cbn.com to get your free copy of Friends of Israel.
Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the work of your Spirit, Lord God, with this movement of getting the Bible,
yes,
Lord, into public schools.
Watch The Prayer Link, Tuesday nights at 6:30.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
Finally tonight, people around the world are responding to the pandemic by finding ways to help and serve others. For one Rhode Island teen, it's all about connections.
Kaya Sooner is bringing smartphones and tablets to hospital patients who can't afford them. That way, they connect with their loved ones who aren't able to visit them during this outbreak.
We've heard a lot about the country reopening and about the need dissipating, but it really is not. There's still patients inside of hospitals who don't have the ability to communicate with their families, and hospitals are still begging us for devices.
And Kaya's group, COVID Connectors, has collected more than 650 devices to give to patients and even won the praise of Rhode Island's governor. That does it for Faith Nation.
Have a great night.